I'm Adam Walker, a biometrics consultant, and this is the Pharma Prescribed podcast, where leaders, innovators, and hidden voices in healthcare open up. No sound bites, no spin, just raw insight, one prescription at a time. In an industry driven by data, protocols, and pressure, we rarely pause to ask the human questions. What drives us? What breaks us? And what truths live behind the titles we wear? Today, we're joined by Dr. Thibault, host of the acclaimed Tech and Drugs podcast and a driving force at the intersection of biotech innovation and digital transformation. His podcast has become a go-to platform for unpacking the future of pharma, where Thibault brings a rare blend of scientific insight and startup savvy, having worked across R&D, venture strategy, and digital health ecosystems. As head of science analytics at Charles River Laboratories, Dr. Geoui spearheaded the creation of a forward-thinking product and data strategy, leveraging advanced digital solutions to accelerate discovery and keep the organization at the leading edge of the life sciences sector. In his current role as Director of Transformation at Zuhlke, he leads the go-to-market strategy for the company's pharma lab automation offering, aligning engineering excellence with real-world demands of drug and R&D. His work includes translating complex science into actionable insight and for connecting the dots between technology, regulation, and patient impact. Thibault, it's great to welcome you on the podcast today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me, Adam. And thanks for seeing you again.
What can I say? You gave me a platform some time ago, and I want to do the same and return the compliment to you. So for the audience that aren't familiar with you, what's the mission you're on and how are you going about doing that?
I think like many people you have on your podcast and people, that we interact with, I'm a scientist by training. For as long as I can remember, I've been interested in science. And pretty quickly, I became interested in biology. I started to be interested in diseases and how to treat diseases. At some point, I wanted to become a doctor. It didn't really work out. So I was looking for, okay, how can I still help doctors and help patients? And long story short, I'm sure we'll get there. I started to work on enablers of the pharmaceutical industry. I started by developing tools that are used in the lab. Then many years ago, I switched to the digital side of things. And when I started to get in digital, I was like, okay, that's really where I want to do my career. In the end, we are in an industry that revolves around data, and the data are messy. There are a lot of great things we can do around data, creating insights, accelerating things, accelerating discovery. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I've been doing for many years, developing products, data products that are used by scientists in R&D and helping organizations leverage their data, discover more things with data, put their data into models, train models, solve all the challenges that are linked to that. Yeah, that's a long answer to a simple question, and I'm sure we'll dig deeper into that. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm working with scientists that are very smart, that are solving very challenging questions, and that need all the help they can get from a bunch of people, and I'm trying to play my part.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And I presume you would agree with me that there's never been a more interesting time to be in and around data science, medical sciences, and the data that you mentioned that's proliferating everywhere we turn right now.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating is that I think now we can talk about the world post-ChatGPT, like post when it was launched. This attracted so much interest. And of course, in every industry, like everyone wanted to do things. But I think what I found fascinating in the past few years is all the investment and attention, especially from the tech sector, to solving scientific challenges in healthcare and in pharma. I've never seen so much interest and investment in our domain. And I find it absolutely fascinating that now you have engineers who have normally worked on social media platform or games or finance problems. Now they work in helping us develop better drugs. And I think it's a much better use of their brain than what they were doing before. It might be a little bit biased, but I think this is fascinating because then you have so many new ideas and so many new ways of looking at old problems where, let's be honest, in our industry, we all know it takes so much time, it costs so much to develop a drug. We are failing all the time. So we need to reinvent how we are developing drugs. And like some people are talking about looking at drug development as an engineering discipline or biology as an engineering discipline. It might be oversimplistic sometimes, but I like this idea of trying to completely change the lens of complex problems. And I think the magic happens when you start to have people from very different backgrounds who are looking at a problem together, but with their own view of the problem. That's really diversity of background, the diversity of science, the diversity of perspective. That's the thing that will help us make real breakthrough.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful insight. Something that's occurred to me recently, and in speaking to friends and colleagues in and around this industry, is that enormous demand for that skill set, the data science skill set, that can go down into the roots of finance and gaming and various other areas. There is such a premium on a very tight group of skills at the moment, though, isn't there? And if I were a data scientist today, I think I'd be writing my own checks. I think the kids that are coming out of university today, if they've got their head screwed on correctly, they can be making a pretty penny pretty quickly, can't they?
And I think that's great what you just said, because think back when I was doing my PhD, and like you, I have a few friends who went the traditional route of becoming a scientist, working in academia. And at that time, it was really because people were driven by passion. They knew that they would not make a lot of money. And now the thing that I find really good is that this career is not only like a passion, but they can make a very good living out of it. And I'm glad that now we are rewarding people who can make an impact on patient life. And again, it's not that I don't like social media or finance or whatever, but I think that finally we are paying scientists who are impacting patient lives at the right level.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's opening the door to opportunity for people that wouldn't otherwise be coming into our industry. That's a certainty. Our routes into clinical research, though different and varied, really are fairly structured down a science route, aren't they? Like you, I had aspirations of being a medical doctor and subsequently managed to just spend an awful lot of time around medical doctors and realizing that perhaps their skill set was very different to mine. Thankfully, because it gave me an opportunity to be in the same room as those people and their brilliant minds. But what occurs to me more and more today is just that there are opportunities out there far broader than we could ever have anticipated in our working careers. 25, 30 years ago, it was a very different world. Technology has advanced enormously in that period of time. And I'm just curious, you said post-ChatGPT world, so it's old hat now. So does it feel like old hat for you? Because I know you're really at the forefront of that and you expose yourself to many of these tools and use them on a more regular basis than probably many of our audience.
Let's be clear, I don't use the tools as a scientist. I use them for productivity, and I try to stay as much up to date as possible on all the developments. But what gets me really excited is that, yes, so we've seen those really fast development of large language models, but it doesn't stop there. And you have a lot of scientists who are saying, look, large language models are great. They are really useful. Their development has been certainly the fastest in the history of tech products, but it's not the end of the story. And we need to think about other architecture. People talk about AGI or SGI. You have the variation of the artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence for biology. So you're starting to see people in our industry talking about biology superintelligence. And that requires a mix of different approach. I'm not an AI scientist. I'm, let's say, an observer of a field, and I'm working with people who are driving the development of those tools. But with that, there is more and more multimodals. There are different inputs. I think it was Yann Lequin, who is the director of research at Meta, who was saying AI will not be smart or will not be really intelligent until it can get multi-sensory input. It's not enough to be able to just read things. It needs to be able to feel things, to see things, to hear things. And today I was looking at the launch of the latest Gemini model, the robotics model from Google. And I think it's really going into this direction. And that's the thing that really gets me excited, because you start to see robots that you can talk to. That's the large language model part of things, but they can see things, they can touch things, they can interact with the world. And that's the thing that gets me really excited. This recent development of AI plus robotics and the impact it will have for everything around us. But I think there are a lot of really cool applications coming up in the lab as well.
I appreciate you sharing that insight. I'm also curious to your thoughts around the next generation that are currently in education today. What is the message that we should be sending to those students and those young people? What are the skills they need, and how do they engage with technology today that's going to support them for their future careers? Because when I listen to various technologists talking about what the next 5, 10, 15 years may look like, it's a very different world that seems and sounds a lot like science fiction. I'm just curious to know how you would translate that to this next generation, because I have lots and lots of very interested people coming in through universities, through my alumni, and in friends and family. And I'd love to know what your perspective is on that.
Again, I think it's $1 million question. I think there are really two aspects to look at it. In the end, I think there are basic skills that no matter the development of technology, those skills will always be important, and maybe even more important now. Critical thinking, being able to think for yourself, being able to assess when you see a piece of information, to be able to assess, okay, what is it that I'm looking at? Where does it come from? To be able to ask the right question. Asking the right question has always been a very important skill. I think it's becoming even more important today. So I think those basic skills that your standard education is supposed to provide, I think it was relevant 100 years ago, it's still very relevant today. And I think there is a lot of discussion around how today we don't need to teach things that we used to teach years ago because now people can just get the information online. And to be honest, I think it's the wrong approach anyway. The curriculum, when you go to school, it's not about learning things by heart. It's about learning how to learn. It's about learning how to think. So of course you can find ways. You don't have to remember everything. You will find this information, but using or treating your brain like a muscle, I think it's something which is important. Now to the other part of the question, what should people study? How do you anticipate things, that will come in 5 or 10 years from now? Let's be honest, people who are working in AI now, a few of them might have studying AI, but I think the vast majority didn't study AI. They studied something else. And then they came to a certain job where they have to perform certain things and they are using AI or they are developing AI. I think when people say I'm working in AI, it means so many things. It's not only being a developer of the model, you can be a product manager who will be using the capability of AI to perform certain tasks. You can be a leader or manager of an organization who will look at AI as a tool, a new tool in the toolbox. So again, back to your question, what should people study? I think they should study something that they're interested in. That's the first thing. Let's look at where our industry. Now we see people who come with a scientific background, a life science background, and people who come with a technology background. And I think the magic happens when you can get those two populations that are very different working together. And I think developing those skills to be at the interface between discipline will be more and more important in the future. Studying life science, but then during your life science studies, learning about technology, maybe learning to code. I know now it's popular to say people don't need to learn how to code anymore. Again, I don't think it's about learning how to code. It's about understanding, training your brain to think about something. Of course, now there are tools that will be better than you, faster than you, but you want to understand what you're doing, not just use a tool blindly. So again, I will focus on something that I like, and then I will try to learn something else to be this person that is at the interface, that can leverage technology for a certain purpose.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And indeed, it mirrors my own experience over the last probably 15 years, where I've worked alongside a lot of people using systems and platforms and implementing systems and software. But alongside that, one of those key skills that I was exposed to was software development and the installation and validation around that. That's a fairly basic thing, but without knowing it, you can't go into an organization and potentially manage vendors, manage software providers, or even understand what's under the hood of the tools that we're using to come up with answers. Yeah, it's learning through doing. You mentioned learning to learn, but also what I hear a lot around now is just that there is deep learning. You're an academic. Your background is in academia. You spend a lot of time in deep learning. And deep learning, by definition, means deep in the knowledge, deep in the weeds, looking at the minutiae, but also processing it really deeply. And my sense today is unfortunately that our next generation are doing this rather than it going deep into their deep psyche, deep learning. And my concern, if I have one particular one, it's that it doesn't go deep enough into their brains and into their learned inherent core to really make it embedded, because it's just surface, like the tools, like the social media. It's just popping up and going, popping up and going. It's not embedding itself in writing a thesis, in doing those deep dives into a library, pulling out all the papers, the journals, the articles, connecting the dots of the challenges. That's my perspective. And I just would love to hear your view on that as an academic, because I do consider you an academic, understanding your background.
So I don't know if I agree with that. Yes, obviously nowadays are surrounded by tools that are just taking our attention. And it's not just kids. I see myself. I will start something video on YouTube and then you see the next one and the next one. And God forbid you're doing that on your mobile. So you have the shorts and then, you after you start with something and you knew why you started with this thing, and then 30 minutes later, you're looking at something completely different. So I think that people have challenges that they are in a completely different environment from the one where we grew up. And I don't think that we will have been different or we will have a different behavior if we had been exposed to the same tools. It's just that there are so many things fighting for our attention. So that's one thing. Now, I think I was talking about passion. I think where I will disagree with you is that I think it's so important for people to find their passion and what they are passionate about, because I think when you're passionate about something, that's what will drive focus and attention. Because if you're passionate about something, then by definition, you will filter out the noise and you will want to learn more things about something. And it doesn't feel like work because that's something that you're passionate about. I think the danger today is that there are so many things that are, again, fighting for attention that people might have more difficulties finding the thing that they are passionate about. So that's the thing where I will be a bit more worried about. It's true that I meet younger people. Now I'm talking like an old person. Younger people who, you're wondering if there is anything that is really passionate them. And I think that, like most scientists, I think I was lucky enough to find something that I was deeply passionate about, that you want to spend time learning it. And it's not learning for learning. It's just because you're really thirsty for knowledge about a certain topic. And when I was a kid, I remember when people were asking me, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? I was saying at that time, I want to invent new things. And that turned into becoming a researcher. And for me, I didn't know what was being a researcher when I was a kid, but I was lucky enough to have parents that brought me to labs. I grew up close to Geneva, so I visited this particle accelerator many times as a kid. And the interesting thing is that my parents are absolutely not scientists. My mother is a nurse. My father worked in real estate, but we had connection and they realized that I was interested in something. So they exposed me to it. And then I started to get more and more interested and wanted to know more. And again, I think that's what we can do with the next generation, is to expose them to different things. And then when you start to see that they are interested in something, then help them explore it. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and that's what I'm trying to do with her. But I realize the challenge. Like, she is exposed to all those things, like all the screens and all the scrolling and all that. And it's very challenging. I think everyone is challenged today to try to channel them to something that feels a bit more productive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's called the distraction economy for a reason, isn't it? There is definitely value in distracting people and trying to gain their attention. And something that I speak to my kids about, they're both university students now, but they often ask my wife and I about how on earth they're supposed to navigate the world of even relationships. You're talking about relationships and finding a life partner when there's so much distraction in the dating world, never mind in the educational world. It's not something that I ever had to worry about.
I'm
but
glad
it's
my daughter is 10.
it blows my mind. Honestly, it blows my mind. And I have to share that because, as I say, that distraction economy is pivotal to so many aspects of their growing adult lives, young adult lives. And I don't lay awake at night worrying about it because thankfully, I think they're going to be okay. They're fairly grounded, and I'm sure your daughter is pretty grounded as well. But it isn't easy. It definitely isn't easy. It sounds like your parents also had a very good approach to giving you opportunity. Like all parents, expose your kids to as many different things and see what floats their boat. That's,
Yeah.
as a parent, the best thing that you can do, isn't it? It's just the variation.
Yeah.
I've just spotted over your shoulder. Is that giant Lego, by the way?
Yes, these are giant Legos.
My point exactly. You clearly are a Lego fan, but around that particular thing, it's exposure to broad experiences and having fun in learning is key, isn't it? It's finding the thing that lights you up, but more than once and on a regular basis that just sends you down that rabbit hole of interest.
I think, again, you're talking about fun, I'm talking about passion. I think it's the same thing. It's learning should not be painful. Otherwise, you won't do it. I don't think that people do the things that are painful. They want to do things that they derive pleasure from. And I think the school system is designed in such a way that for some people, they might derive pleasure from the way it's designed and the way the knowledge is delivered to them. But I think for a large part of the population that don't fit into this exact mold, then the experience is painful. And it's interesting because when I was doing my PhD, I remember we had groups of PhD students where we had training together. We were giving classes. So we were like kind of assistant professor. They were bringing us in retreat for a few days in the mountains around Grenoble. And we had this long discussion about our experience, like getting into science and teaching. And you wouldn't believe the number of people who told me that when they were in high school, they were told by their professor, you should not study because you're not good at that, and just find a job after you graduate from high school. I heard that from my biology teacher. She was telling me, you should not study because you're not made for that. And it's interesting because like so many people who were doing their PhDs had this experience because we were not necessarily fitting into this exact mold during high school. And for me, I don't know if it's the right English expression. Maybe I'm a contrarian. You know, if someone tells me that I should not do something, I will do it. And then like I ended up doing a PhD in biology. I think there is more than just doing it just to annoy my old biology professor. But I think the fact that you're being told that you can't do something, even if you like it, then for some, it can create two reactions. For some people, it might break them. For other people, it might give them even more energy to prove other people wrong. But I think this is so important. And now being a parent, that's something that I'm paying so much attention to. When teachers are saying something, sometimes they don't think about it, but then it can really impact the development of a kid. If you tell them, you're not really good at that, focus on something else. I think it's terrible. I think there are so many ways of learning. You might not be good with a certain way of learning. I think the more important thing is find the ways of learning that works for you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And in fact, with both of our children, neither of them had it easy academically, particularly in the state school system in the UK. And either of them could have quite easily just finished high school and left and got jobs. But what was really interesting, I think, for my wife and I was really just that we knew the value that higher education gave for us. And it wasn't just about the higher education, it was about the life experiences that it gave us. It was the breadth of understanding of living with people, figuring out bills, all of those kind of things that sit alongside going to lectures, socializing, making sure you're getting there, delivering and handing in your coursework on time. But I can honestly say for both our kids, they're pretty well rounded, but also both of them are fairly late developers. They found their passion and their drive and their energy where education was concerned at a much later point. If they'd have listened to the teachers and their educators at a younger age, they would have been on the scrap heap academically. And indeed, both of them individually have done amazing things because they didn't take that label with them. And there were others in their peer group, and I'm sure you'll experience this with your daughter as well, others in their peer group who were clearly shining at the age of 12, 13, that then fell by the wayside because the best kid at 12 and 13 isn't always the best student at 17, 18, because all sorts of other things are going on for them then. There's hormones, there's life, there's external factors that are going on around them. And I don't think anyone really appreciates quite how impactful that can be. I know we're going down a very different route to what I anticipated speaking about today, but nevertheless, I think this is a really key point that is worth sharing.
I know, definitely.
So coming back to
Yeah.
you, Thibault, and your experiences, you inspired me to set up a podcast. You had me on your Tech and Drugs podcast some time ago, and I really loved your, what I call your main character energy. You have unbelievable energy, and you have drive and determination. And even before we hit record today, you were telling me about all the things that you were doing. I'd love to know what drove you to set up a podcast of your own. Why did you think there was value in you doing that? What was your passion around that?
So first of all, I like listening to podcasts. So that's the first thing. When I go running, by definition, I will listen to a podcast because that's when I have time to do it. And there, again, like we were talking about learning earlier. Now, if I think back to when I was, I don't know, 20, for instance, we didn't have access to all this knowledge. Now, just pick a topic and you will have thousands of things, and there is always something new to discover. So, yes, first thing, love podcasts. The second thing is that one of the things that drove me to starting this podcast is that I love technology and I love drug discovery and development. And for me, there was a gap. I could find sometime a few episodes of different podcasts talking about the application of technology to the development of drugs. But there was not one podcast that really talked only about that, where we brought guests that were using AI, ML, so automation to accelerate drug discovery and development. So I was like, hey, I want to talk about that because that's what I want to listen to. And the third thing, which is very selfishly, I wanted to meet people. And I thought, look, it's easier to meet people and to connect to people if you have something to offer. So if you have a platform to offer. And now the podcast is still small. There are just a few episodes. Generally speaking, people who participated, they liked it. And I think it can be useful for them because then they can tell their story and then there is a place where their story is recorded and they can share it. So for me, it was really almost like a tool to connect with new people. And that's how we met. And we ended up then meeting face to face. So that's really what I like actually now. I've never been a natural networker. I didn't like networking because I don't like to start a conversation with someone that I don't know if I don't know what they are interested in. My friends make fun of me when I tell them that I'm quite shy. They're like, no, you're not shy. You like to talk and you like to do podcasts and things like that. I'm like, yes, I like to do that if I can control the topic that we are talking about. I don't like to talk about random stuff. Let's talk about AI in drug development. And then if you want to talk about that, I'll have a conversation with you for 3 hours. That's why when I started this podcast, I'm like, hey, it's a control environment, again, science, control environment where I know what we will be talking about. I know that it's something that will be interesting to me and to the people I'm inviting because they accepted the invite to talk about technology and drug R&D. So that's a story.
Yeah, I mean, that really does resonate so loudly with me because similar to you, when I'm walking my dogs, and I've got 3 of them, I'm looking around me, they're not here at the moment because they make too much noise. But when I'm walking my dogs, that's what I'm doing. And exactly to that point around knowledge, I love hearing other people's stories. And also, you feel like they're sat on your shoulder. It feels like quite an intimate thing, doesn't it? It feels like you're having a one-to-one with that person, particularly. And as someone who co-hosted a podcast previously, I loved it. And I also recognized that it did generate interest both in the services that I offer as an independent consultant, but more importantly, it made connections with people that I wouldn't otherwise have met. When that started, that was during the pandemic when we were all locked down. And the world actually was much more accessible because you only had to send someone an invitation and you could have a conversation with a CEO that would never have spoken to you in a conference setting. And you got them for a allotted period of time and you can ask them as many questions as you want, like you said, on your terms. And it's proved to be quite a powerful tool. And I think it's really key to forming deeper connections across this industry in which we work. It's just that sometimes you just don't know what you're going to unearth in these conversations. As I say, we're fortunate enough to have met, and I've sensed your energy in person as much as I sensed it before we met, actually virtually, because I think for you, it really does resonate through a screen, dare I say. So I appreciate you sharing that. And there is no limit to what you can do on a podcast, is there? There's fun to be had in the editing, in the cutting, in all the things that we do or don't do, the things that make its way to the final cut or whatever. But as far as your plans for the Tech and Drugs podcast, what are your anticipated? What are you hoping for that?
So you mentioned like the editing and the cutting. That's the part I don't like. What I like is talking to people like this. First time you meet someone and you have this discussion, you hear all the interesting things they have to say. For me, listening again to that afterward, like multiple times and doing the cutting and the editing, that's the thing actually which is preventing me from doing more of it. Now, the good news is that I'm working for a company called Zühlke. It's a Swiss engineering company, and we do projects across multiple industry, but we are very strong in medtech, in healthcare, and we are really investing in pharma, which is why I joined them very recently in June. And one of the things when I joined them, they were like, look, we like what you're doing on LinkedIn. We like that you are doing this podcast. And now they are helping me actually with editing. So they say it's still your podcast, but since it's aligned with the topic that we want to talk about, the topic that we want to talk to our client about, we can help you get more episodes out. And the thing that I really like is that you've been on my podcast. It's not a sales pitch. It's really about talking to people, telling their story. I invited a lot of people coming from startups. So at some point, of course, I want to hear about the startup. I want to hear about why they started it, what's the problem that they are solving. So in a way, like there is a commercial aspect because people will know about their startup. But we are not pushing product or services. That being said, the way I'm thinking about that, and I've done marketing many years ago, now using LinkedIn and doing this podcast, I'm thinking about marketing in a very different way. I think you don't have to do a sales pitch all the time. If you talk about relevant challenges, relevant topics, you bring people who have expertise. For me, that's the best sales pitch, to be honest, because people will know that you're connected to the right people, that you're knowledgeable about certain topics. So you don't have to do a hard sell in something like that. I think it's much more subtle. And in the end, you will make the right connection, you will develop your network, and that will create opportunities. I think it's important to play the long game when you're doing that. So yes, to answer your question, my plan for the podcast, continue doing it, continue to meet very interesting people, to meet people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Again, getting help on the part that I don't like doing so that I can focus more on the thing that I like doing.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant perspective you give there. I wouldn't say it's a sales pitch at all. It's about connecting with like-minded souls, isn't it? That's what I always feel. Whenever I'm in the virtual room with someone, I feel like it's just us. And it can go out to whoever and whomever wants to listen to it. But the reality is, I think the magic is in the virtual room. The energy is in the virtual room, and the communication. There are no distractions. I love that. I switched off my phone. I've turned off my emails. You've got my full undivided attention. Not many people get that for very long. So I think we both committed to that. And for that, I'm entirely appreciative of that. So you talked about Zuhlke. They're a very interesting company, aren't they? They're in a lot of different verticals. And what are they, a consulting company? How do they operate?
So Zühlke, it's a company that was born in Switzerland in 1968. And the DNA of Zühlke at the core, it's a bunch of engineers. They started in the late 60s helping medical device companies. So really providing support for hardware, and throughout the years, they started to add all the engineering disciplines you can imagine: hardware, electronics, optics, software, data, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's a consulting company as well. So they have also strategy and all the things that it's a full service company. And so what really attracted me to the company is that I worked with consulting companies over the years. And sometimes you work, most of the time they are really smart people, but they will give you recommendation and then it's up to you to implement the recommendation. What I like with Zuhlke is that we will work with the client to understand their challenges. We will work with them to develop an ideal solution, but then we can go to our workshops and we can design prototypes, we can iterate, and we can go really fast and come up with something that they can actually implement in their labs. And then we will stay with them. And we have often engineers that will stay with clients for years that are really part of the project. So I really like this aspect of our work where it's really very tangible what we can deliver. And another thing, I think, the company really, they pride themselves. It's a Swiss company. So there is a bit of a Swiss cliche that it's high quality. They like to take really hard engineering problem, and like the harder the problem, the better. So now think about that applied to pharma. That's just brilliant. And the other thing is that we have colleagues that have worked across so many different industries. And as I was saying earlier in the discussion, I think the magic happens when you get people from different backgrounds who look at your problem and say, hey, I've done that on a different problem, a different industry, but have you thought about that? And this is where also there is a challenge, because in pharma, people have a tendency to say, hey, we are different, we are unique. I want people who worked exactly on the same thing somewhere else. And I'm like, yes, there is a value in bringing pharma specific experience, but I think there is also a lot of value bringing experience from other domains. So I think now what we are doing is that we are hiring a lot of people with 20 years of pharma experience, and we are mixing them with people who come from very different backgrounds. And that's where the magic happens, when you can take all this experience across multiple domains to look at the most challenging, like strategy and engineering problems in pharma. What I'm focusing on specifically is the research part, things that people will call lab of the future, where you look at existing labs where a lot of instruments, for instance, are not connected, where the data is in multiple silos. And now people start to see those lab in the loop, where you start your research in silico, you generate data in semi-autonomous lab, you feed the data back into the models, and they're like, I want to implement that. But then there are so many challenges associated with that, because they have an existing infrastructure, they need to modernize it, but they need to modernize it while still running it. Because it's not like we can pause for 6 months and change everything, or not everyone has the chance to start from the blank slate and have an empty lab and build it from scratch. If they can do that, then it's simple. But most of them can't. They have their infrastructure and they need to deal with that. So the image that I like, it's like flying a very old plane and trying to turn it into a fighter jet while not crashing it. So that's what we help our clients. It's modernizing their infrastructure, picking the right use case to start with, making sure that they are not stuck in endless POC, and really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. That's what we want to do. That's how we will experiment. And that's the path from experiment to production. So that's what we do. That's what I like. I'm happy to be part of this journey. I think for me, consulting is something relatively new. And what I really like is the diversity of the project. Every day you're talking to a different client. We have different challenges. There are common themes, of course, but everyone is unique and everyone has a unique environment and unique problems to solve.
That's a wonderful insight you provided there. And I think it's almost full circle from where we started at the beginning of this conversation, talking about opportunity and bringing together experts from different fields. You coalesced that all around the example of Zuhlke, which sounds like a wonderful organization with amazing opportunities, not just for you, for many of our listeners. I'm sure there is an alignment around the services that are offered and what everyone needs. Your example of changing an airplane mid-flight is exactly the experiences that I'm seeing right now as well in organizations that I'm supporting. Technology is moving at such a pace, and yet many of the old ways remain with us, and we have to modernize in flight, as you say. I think that's a really good way to bring us to a conclusion of the conversation, but also I always like to finish with a quick fire round. So at this point, I'd like to ask a few brief questions around your own personal experiences, Thibault. So what is the one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Stay curious. Don't have preconceived ideas. Try different things. Do what you think is scary sometimes.
What are the top 3 qualities you value most when building a team?
Honesty, openness, being smart.
What is your favorite thing outside of work?
I have many favorite things. Anything sci-fi related, books, movies, series. Yeah. Always related to science, like a different view on science.
And just in case she's listening, your daughter, of course.
Of course. Introducing my daughter to sci-fi is one of my mission.
That's brilliant. And finally, what is your number one golden rule in life and in business, Thibault?
An important one, and it's a difficult one. Number one golden rule: never burn bridges. It's a small world. We are in such a small world. Whether it's in life or in business, you'll always meet people multiple times. And I think actually, maybe I have two golden rules. How do you say that in English? I think it's called giving forward. I think it's important to give without expecting something in return. The way I'm thinking about it is that if you do good things, at some point, something good will happen to you. Maybe it's a bit naive, but that's how I like to treat people. I'll often connect people together because I think it's the right thing to do. I don't expect anything in return. But then, sometimes things come in return, and then when you least expect it, some new opportunities come from people that you met many years ago. You've done something good for them many years ago. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with that particular statement more. It's probably the reason why you and I connected. It's also definitely the reason why we're talking today. And I think that paying forward principle is really important, because effectively what you're saying is what you put out there is what ultimately will come back to you, whether or not there is a paycheck or something else there. It's serendipity, isn't it? It's paying forward in serendipity. So we've had a really broad, open and interesting conversation today, Thibault. I really have enjoyed every moment of it. And I'm very much looking forward to the next opportunity when we can talk together, Thibault, and explore this further, because this is really reinforcing the value of connection to me. Meeting with people, meeting with like-minded souls, but also I think paying forward in the opportunity to just connect, reconnect, do good things together. Thank you so much today. For our listeners, if they want to reach out to you directly, what's the best way to get in contact with you, Thibault?
LinkedIn, they connect, send me a DM on LinkedIn, and then I'm there every day. Certainly too much on LinkedIn, but that's definitely a place where I'm easy to find.
Well, make sure that gets added to the show notes. And once again, I'd really like to thank you for taking the time to be on Pharma Prescribed today, Thibault. It's been an absolute delight to speak again.
Thanks, Adam. And the next time, let's do it in person.